Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy
All
to be
right,
here.
sir. Growing up, what were your favorite animated movies and TV shows?
Um, I grew up as a Disney guy. That's what I always tell people that animation was my astronaut dream. Growing up on the East Coast, uh, I didn't really think it was possible. Like it was just I could draw, and on the East Coast, and I didn't know anyone that was even in the industry, entertainment industry. And I always thought art was the the end all was teaching, right? So I don't know, but I always wanted to be an animator when I was a kid. Like that's just what I wanted as a Little Mermaid, Lion King, Aladdin. Like those are the ones that kind of got me into this. Um, I didn't really watch too much TV shows, other than like Thundercats or you know the nostalgia ones like that. But it was the features that really got me into it. And then I got into sports and girls
Yeah.
and everything else, and I stopped drawing as much, and I never really thought of it. And I kind of headed on a career path of becoming a high school phys ed teacher because I wrestled all through high school and college, and I wanted to compete. And my high school wrestling coach was my mentor and the person that I was following, in his footsteps almost. Um, I even went to the college that he went to.
Wow.
uh, but I found out that in my first year I got really bored.
Mm.
Like I was doing really well in classes that probably should have been doing well with very little effort. Um, and I was drawing more than I was paying attention, and getting good grades. And I was just like, this isn't fun. Like, it's not challenging. And wrestling stopped being fun because it was a Division I school, and it was more business than it was, you know, gainful for me. So um, I took a semester off from there, and I worked from home and built a portfolio, and then I applied to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan because that's the only school at that time that I knew anything about in terms of art or leading towards a career in animation.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then all stemmed from my the one art class I took in high school was my senior year just to get good grades because I was an athlete,
Right.
and I wanted free time. Um, my art teacher was really into me, and like she saw what I could do, and like she would enter my stuff into competitions and like things that I've never done before. Like I did a pastel drawing of Tupac,
Mm.
or Michael Jordan, and I'd never touched pastels in my life. It just was like I have time in class, I'll do it. Um, and then she's kind of just planted that seed for me. I'll never forget it because she's like, you should really go to SVA. And that's all I think she knew about because it was the East Coast lifestyle. Like, we don't have people in Hollywood, right?
Mm.
Um, and that just kind of stuck in the back of my head. And I think once I started getting bored in college and stuff, that voice started coming back to me, being like, you should do this. Like, whatever. Like, this is probably where you need to go. And I decided that I was going to do it once and do it right. And my goal was to be out here in California working for the big studios.
That's amazing. Okay, first off, what school did you wrestle at? You said Division One. That's a big deal.
It sounds bigger than it is. The program was great. It's East Stroudsburg University. It's a
Oh,
very
okay.
small school.
Okay.
It wasn't like Michigan or Penn State or anything like
Okay.
that. Um, I don't think I was ever good enough to do that, but I mean, it was. I don't know. I guess I had been in my senior year. I had been hoping I was going to get scholarships. I
Mm.
got hurt, and things kind of just didn't go my way that year. Like I didn't go as far as I wanted to in states and all this other stuff. But I competed in nationals during the spring, which was my kind of go-to. And uh, I kind of, I guess I kind of let go of my college choices. Because I was looking at like West Virginia, I was looking at the Naval Academy, I was looking at uh, James Madison, all these big schools in the East Coast, that have good
Right.
wrestling programs. But then I just decided on the East Stroudsburg because,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
What a wild journey so far. Like, wow, like you saw early on you had talent to draw. Then it sounded like there was a pause on it for a while. You get
Mm-hmm.
into wrestling, get into sports, then you start seeing like you're drawing again, and then you get like that reinforcement from a teacher. saying, "Hey, you should just take a look at this." So take us from you're at school, you're building your craft, and you're embarking on your California goal.
Okay, well, at that point, I was already 3 years older than all my classmates, and I was living in Jersey and commuting to New York every day in Manhattan. And I mean, I was on a mission. It was at that point, like I had originally went to East Stroudsburg because I wanted the experience of a campus and, grass and quads and dorms and stuff. And I wasn't as big of a fan of New York City. I'd gone there when I was a kid, and then to me it wasn't attractive. I wasn't, and that's not the type of person I am. But you know, it was the only option that I knew of. So I applied, got in. My first year, I commuted every day, and it sucked. It was like 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours every day, just in the car, or going to Jersey City, then into the city, and then to class, and it was all around 9/11. So it was a big transition for me. And I figured out real quick that like, uh, if I was going to be able to do this, I need to live in the city or be closer. Um, and between, that first year, I ended up applying to become an RA. So I was an RA for my next 3 years at school, which means I got to live in New York City for free. Um, and that made all the difference because I was able to do my work. I didn't have to commute every day. Um, and like I said, because I was 3 years older than everyone, I didn't really connect to too many of my classmates on like a social level because they were in a headspace that I had already been in, of being in college for the first time and away from your parents and drinking and doing all this stuff, right? And all I wanted was I was career oriented. So even after my first year, I applied for an internship at Film Roman out here in LA, and they are the studio that does Simpsons. At the time, they were doing King of the Hill. They were doing a lot of Comedy Central stuff.
Wow.
And the one of the managers of the studio had come out and spoke to our class, and had like kind of advertised this internship program. And I was like, shit, let's do it. I hope I can curse. I'm sorry, I do that a lot, and I don't
It's
think
okay.
about it. Um, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna apply. And like, he was skeptical because I was a first year student. I was on the East Coast. He didn't even think I was gonna come out. Like, he wasn't gonna give me the internship. But then I showed up. And my buddy and I that summer we drove out in his pickup truck across country, and I lived with an old buddy that I went to East Stroudsburg with, who's out here now and is a cop. So I lived with him all summer, and I did an internship there. And it was kind of a wasted experience because I didn't know enough about animation at the time because I had just been a first year student. So I
Right.
didn't know the questions to ask, things to do, the people to talk to. But it was cool. I liked it.
Yeah.
Um, and it gave me a taste for what my future would be. Um, and then, I went back to school with this determination that I'm just going to finish it, and I was going to go to work at Pixar. You know,
Yeah.
and at the end of the 4 years, at that point, I'd already met my wife, who was my girlfriend at that time. We
Wow.
started dating. She was from East Stroudsburg originally, and we met after the fact because she was living in Connecticut, and we had mutual friends and went back to a homecoming party. Anyway, um, so I was with her my sophomore year on of SVA, and for as soon as I met her, I told her, I'm headed out to California at some point. Like, it's
Wow.
inevitable. So if you want to stick around, great. If you don't, maybe we should end this. And she
Wow.
stuck. Because I knew I was on a mission. Like this, I was not going to have a career in animation on the East Coast. Um, Ironically, I stayed out in New York for about 5 or 6 years after college, mostly because I was doing well enough to get jobs. And I don't know if either of us were ready to part from our families at that time.
Sure.
Um, but it was going to happen eventually. And 5 years later, I think 2010, I was working at this great studio in New York called Flicker Lab, who had made me their animation director. And like, we
Wow.
were doing cool projects for a while, but then we started doing like, the industry was starting to change, and like animation jobs were leaving New York. Studios were closing down. Productions were not coming in because we don't have a union. And we started doing um, like cutting and pasting like children's books and making like really cheesy motion graphics for apps, right? It was and I was miserable. And then that's when I went home and I told my wife, because I had just gotten off a project with them where I animated a whole thing on napkins, like dinner napkins,
Oh my
with
God.
like stick figures and a Sharpie for a bank commercial, and it was for not even for a commercial, it was for their um like one of their events or like private events for their employees, and it was
Right.
so much fun. Like I loved doing it.
Wow.
And then I went on to doing these books, and I was like, oh, this sucks. Like I gotta get. I saw that's where things were going,
Right.
and I went home that night and I told my wife like, we need to move out west. So a few weeks later, I took a week off and I flew out and I stayed with a buddy of mine out here and made a bunch of informational interviews. I met with studios like Six Point Harness, Nickelodeon, um, Warner Brothers. As many contacts that I knew, I tried to at least meet. And Six Point Harness loved my work and stuff, and they were like, "We'll hire you as soon as we get a green light." So
Wow.
I went back home. It was I think June maybe. I came out here, and they just I kept in touch with them, and by October they're like, or I guess September they told me they're like, "We got the green light. Come on out." And in October, my wife
Wow.
and I were out here.
Dan, I love your tenacity. Like you had that singular focus. You would not be denied. And you know what? You got to be obsessed sometimes, man, to go after your goals. The fact that you laid it out for your wife. Listen, if you want to be with me, here's the package. Here's the deal. Well, what were your family members thinking when you were going on this mission of yours?
Well, let's hear. My parents were always supportive. I mean, they were great. My dad passed when I was in school of visual arts, unfortunately,
Oh,
from brain cancer.
no.
Um,
Sorry.
so it was that's okay. I mean, it was a long time ago, but I mean, he was always supportive of it, and like they didn't even. It was almost like if they didn't even question it. Like it was almost like they got it. Like because they knew what I had. Like I was able to do. Like, my mom would always tell stories about how drawing was my babysitter. Like she could just sit me in the high chair and I would just draw for hours, as a kid. So I think she was kind of, I'm sure, skeptical because, like I said, our growing up on the East Coast, we don't have access to the entertainment industry like people out here. Like my daughters right now, I have two daughters that are 8 and 10, and like all they know is people that are in the animation community. Like all their uncles who are my best friends now are all amazing artists that are all working in the industry. So it's like no big deal to them, right?
Right.
But like on the East Coast, I think my mom just she believed that she knew what I could do in terms of putting my mind to stuff. Which I think I showed proof of that in my wrestling, where like every year I would go spring and summer I would train all year round to go compete all over the country in Greco-Roman. So, and I would go by myself. Like I would drive around the state and go to different tournaments. And I was a ref. I
Mhm.
raised money for my own trips. Like I did a lot of stuff. Like I took a lot of initiative for stuff like that. So I don't think they had any doubts. I think money was more a bigger question, but you
Mhm.
know, with loans and whatever else, we figured it out. Um, my brother, I think they were all generally skeptical of there being a career just for not knowing what is out there, right? But no one was like, "Don't do it, you're an idiot," you know. So
You know what? Just hearing your story, Dan, it's just incredible how you have this inner motor, like the self-motivating kind of desire. Because listen, no one's gonna give it to you, man. No one's gonna give you your dreams. Yeah, here you go, Dan. Yeah, you want to come out to California? Here's the red carpet. No, you got to go get it. And I love your story, Dan. It's about you earning it, going after it. You're driving 4 hours back and forth to New York. You hate it, but you know the end goal, man. You know what you want to do. So I love that about like your story, just the drive, man. You need it, right?
yeah, they do. I think I'm learning that lesson more and more each day as I'm an adult. It's like life doesn't give a fuck, and like it's gonna throw shit at you, and it's I always quote Rocky Five, unfortunately, because it's not the greatest of Rockies, but it's
Right.
got one of those greatest speeches ever from Sylvester Stallone when he's talking to his son about like life's gonna throw punches at you, and it's not how many punches you throw back; it's how many times you get up. And like I just alone gives me chills just thinking about it. So it's like that's kind of what I go for. It's like I learn my lesson and I move forward as best as I can.
For
You know.
sure. So tell me how you cracked into DreamWorks, man. Like you're a Disney guy growing up. You're Disney. Like, aren't these guys rivals? Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks?
Nah, because for me, it's always been the storytelling. And as I've evolved in my career, it's more about the filmmaking. So whether it's animation or not, I don't care. I mean, whether it's 2D or it's CG, I don't care. It's about creating moments, right? And I think for me, I kind of DreamWorks kind of landed in my lap with a huge amount of luck, I would say. Um, believe it or not, but when I moved out here in 2010, like I basically had to start my career over because no one knew me. Any accolades, any awards, any reputation that I earned in New York, which was pretty good, I feel, was non-existent here. And not until I could show people what I could do did it start to spread and start to help me. So I spent a good 4 or 5 years here, like working through the smaller studios, trying to break in. I was doing a lot more animation work than I was doing story work because I didn't have the portfolio for it. And to be honest, I'm not the best draftsman, and it's there's a lot of other people that are way better than I. But I believed in what I could do and what I could bring to the table. And I got a call one day in 2014 from a guy that I went to high school with in Parsippany, New Jersey. He was one of my best friends, younger brother's best friend. But I mean, he was a year younger than me, so we knew each other pretty well. But it's just weird because it's 3,000 miles away that we knew each other 20 years ago. But he had gone into the entertainment industry, and I had always known he'd worked for Nickelodeon, but he was always in live action. But then one day he called me up, and yeah, we went to a restaurant for lunch, and he's like, "Do you want to come work for DreamWorks?" He's like, "We're starting up a TV division," and it just so happened that they were moving into a building that was right down the street from my house.
Get
The
out of
house that
here. Oh my
ready
gosh.
like when we moved out here in 2010, we stayed in a couple of hotels in Hollywood, and my wife hated me. Oh God, she. Um, and what sucks is like we had stupidly planned a vacation in between moving. So like I
Oh,
was we packed up our house because we had a plan before kids to go to all of our heritage countries, like to travel and stuff. So we went to Italy, we went to Prague, we went to Eastern Europe, and that trip itself was the one that we went from. We packed up our New York apartment, sent it out with the company, flew to Eastern Europe for 2 weeks, flew to California, and waited for our stuff. So, which was a mistake because that was way more stressful than it should be.
okay.
But we spent 3 or 4 days living in a hotel, and one day, rainy day, the fourth rainy day, we were driving around, and we were both sick. We both had the flu, and we had just come back from vacation. We had no money, and we had just happened upon this house in Glendale, and it was almost like that the Up movie where it's like it was surrounded by like apartment buildings. It was just this cute little house,
Right.
and we somehow got it, and we rented it for the next almost 10 years. But it was down the street from a corporate building, that Unum building in Glendale, and at that in 2014, that's when DreamWorks had bought like two or three floors in that building, or rented 2 or 3 floors, and that's when DreamWorks TV started.
Right.
So the fact that it was right down the street from me, it was the same year my daughter was born the week I was hired.
Wow.
Like things were falling into place, and it really kind of just fell in my lap because I was definitely not ready for it. When I got onto Puss in Boots, I was with an incredible crew, and I was way behind.
Right.
So I like to the point where my boss had even said later on that he was ready to fire me,
Wow.
just because I wasn't cutting it. Like, but after one episode, it was clear. I mean, there was no question in my mind that I was the weakest link at that point.
Hmm.
Um, and then I just put in the time. We had our baby, and the awesome thing, DreamWorks has been amazing with like family stuff because they have this philosophy that we're making family content. If we can't treat our employees like their family or they or respect that they have families, then it's pointless, right? So that was one of the first things that same boss told me. So
Wow.
the great thing is that I lived a block away, that I could leave at 5 every day and go see my daughter and my wife, or I could go home at lunchtime and spend an hour with them. And then when they went to bed at 8, I came back to the studio for a couple hours. So like no matter what time I came in the morning, like if I showed up at 12 for whatever reason, if I had doctor's appointments, I'd still leave at 5 just so I could be with my family while they were awake. And then I'd go back from 9 until anywhere from 12 to 2. And I'd be the only one there. But it was my way of catching up. I wanted to put in the hours, put in the time, figure out how I could turn my work into something that was going to keep me employed. And by the end of 3 seasons, I was directing. So
The Puss in Boots, director of Puss in Boots. Good for you, man. I love the work ethic, Dan. I just your dedication, man. Like, good for you. A lot of people, they would have been pretty scared, 'cause it sounded like it was on the fence for a while in that first season with Puss in Boots. But you're like, you know what? I came too far for this, man. I'm not gonna just lie down and just let it happen.
and that's been my whole life. Like I mean, even when I was wrestling, like I was never the best. I mean, I was good. I was competitive. I mean, I won plenty of medals, plenty of awards, but I always did best when I was surrounded by better people, right? Or people that I wanted to soak up from. And when like my senior year, I on my high school team, I feel like I was probably one of the better kids,
Mm.
and I didn't have the competition in the room to help push me and drive me, right? And I think that was my biggest. That's what kind of hurt me the most in terms of my career, my wrestling career, and going forward. Um, because my previous year, I had two senior studs that were kicking my ass every day, and I
Mm.
was a beast because of them, right? So my work ethic, and even when I played football and stuff, like I'm not the biggest guy. I'm 5 foot nothing. I'm not fast, but my work ethic was always better than anyone, and that's been my go-to for everything. Like if I'm not going to be the best, I'll work harder than the best, and it's worked out so far. So
I would say so, man. I'm looking at your resume, and Mr. Dan here, he's worked on various different shows for DreamWorks, like TV shows like Puss in Boots, Kung Fu Panda, Boss Baby, stuff like that, right?
yep, yeah. These are actually all these are my shows
Look
right
at
behind me.
that. So yeah, for the listeners out there, yeah, in behind him, he's got these pictures from his different shows like Boss Baby, Puss in Boots. Quite the resume, sir. So for the listener viewer doesn't know how animated TV works. Like one episode, let's say we're doing one episode, Dan. How long does that take? What is the process to from idea to final episode, final product?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because TV is very much like a condensed version of any other film or feature pipeline, where like
Okay.
everything is the same, right, from beginning to end. But it's like if this is the bar schedule for one TV is this, where it overlaps everything, like everything from writing to design to storyboarding to animation, and then um, so the conception of the idea begins with the executives and the development team, right, or whoever they're selling it to, and then there's a writing stage that'll start, where we'll have executives and head writers, and then a team of writers that'll do like rotate episodes, um, and they'll generally have maybe like anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks to do 3 or 4 drafts. Um, then what happens is like once they get like 2 or 3 scripts, that's when they start bringing in like the directors and the storyboard teams. So it's all kind of like stepped, right? But there's an overlap where like the start and the end of people, right? And then sometimes design is thrown somewhere in the middle so that it can happen simultaneously.
Hmm.
Uh, so I'd say every stage from writing, then to boarding, then to making the animatics, then to sending it out to animation, they all average maybe around 10 weeks, for one single episode. Um, because once I get a script, we'll launch my storyboard team, and on a show for DreamWorks, we'll have like three storyboard artists and one revisionist. And the three storyboard artists will divide a script up into, like, if it's a 30-page script, say, we'll divide it into 10 pages, and they each have 6 to 8 weeks to storyboard it, and with check-ins in the middle and pitches in the middle where we check in and show the executives and address notes and whatever. Once they finish and clean up and address all the notes, it gets passed on to me and my revisionist and my editor. And we'll time everything, and we'll have three chances to kind of, or two chances really, to kind of get it into a shape where then our bosses, our supervising director and producer will spend the last 2 weeks kind of polishing it up, making sure it's fine for shipping, making sure everything hooks up and story's straight. And then it gets a week later or so, it gets shipped out to the vendor studio who will animate it. And then it comes back for lighting and compositing and post-production. So, I mean, all in all, like an entire order of a show ranges from a year to 2 years. And that's about 26 episodes, maybe,
Okay.
on average. And we have three teams. So like there's myself, and there's two other episodic directors who has three board artists and a revisionist of their own, and we all each get every third episode basically. So in order of 24, I'll get 8 or 9 episodes, and the other director will get 8 or 9 episodes, and so on. So that's kind of like the short answer for that, of like how long it takes. But it's a fast process, faster than anything else. Like, we don't have time to kind of fix all the problems, right? We kind of have to make it as best as we possibly can and just move forward.
My goodness. That's really cool. Wow. I've never, I've seen some of the behind the scenes aspects of like Pixar movies and stuff like that. So it's nice to get your point of view around, animated TV. That's not something I'm very accustomed to. So that's cool, man. During this,
go ahead. Sorry.
Same thing. No, it's okay. So during the process, do you ever get a chance to sit in with like celebrity voices, like, Jack Black or anything, or?
I don't know. But my bosses do. Like, and I could if I wanted to. Like, I mean, like if I want to go to the records, but again, like everything is so compartmentalized in TV, and everything is on a schedule and in orders that like dominoes will fall if things get displaced. So, everybody has a role, and it's kind of an assembly line, right? Where like I even tell my storyboard artists, like, I don't need you to finish this. I don't need you to give me 150%. I just need you to build me the frame of the house. I'll put on the siding, I'll put up the drywall, I'll make it look pretty and bring it all together. I just need you to give me something that I can work with, right? And then that's kind of how it goes. It's like we don't have the time that feature generally does. Like when you watch Pixar, it's like they're doing 15, 20 iterations of the same gag. It's like, that would be lovely, but also frustrating. Because sometimes you just want to move forward. I loved earlier in my career working on commercials because I liked that turnover of going on to the next thing. And I never thought I would like TV because I was not a big TV fan, but like this is the pace that I like. Like I like changing stories. I like not lingering and beating something to death. But that's also, I haven't been in a feature, so I'm comparing it to nothing. This is all I know.
Maybe one day, Dan. One day.
Maybe. I would love to. I mean, I am thirsting for the bigger stage. I won't lie. I want to have that experience of like telling a longer form story and like not having that feeling that like it's going to be watered down by, the budget later on, with, it getting sent overseas to be animated versus having our own in-house animators working on it to make it look even better. But technology is making it so much easier. So
for sure. Listen, Dan, like if the big wigs at DreamWorks are watching or listening, guys, give this guy a promotion, man. Come on, give him the movies. Let's go.
I appreciate it. Thank you. One day, like you said.
One day. All right. So Dan, my typical audience member, they're either like a career pivoter, like someone who's had a career and they want to try something different, or someone just starting out, right? So if they want to get into animation, like say, okay, say something like you're doing, like what is the pathway? What kind of skills do they need? Talent? What do they need?
To draw. Obviously, that's the biggest thing. To draw well and clearly and fast. Um, it doesn't always have to be pretty. It just has to be clear. Um, so I would say that and a knowledge of film language. That's the one thing I think most of new artists that I have come onto my teams because every show I have, I don't have the same team. There's such a big turnaround because of the overlap. Where like, or even now, on the show that I'm on now, my probably one of the best teams I've ever had. I don't. It's gone now. Like they're on to other stuff or they've moved on because their role is done. Um, but so I think just being able to draw and the next biggest thing is communication. Like in TV, we have such a TV in particular, but I mean it would work in any industry and even in feature. It's like if you're not going to communicate your problems, no one's going to know. So if you're struggling with something, or if you're not being able to figure it out, and you wait until the day you need to pitch it to our bosses and tell us, then it's like we can't do anything about it, and we can't even give you notes on what you didn't do. But like if you tell us Monday that you haven't struggled, like you're struggling to make the deadline, like we can move it to maybe Monday. Like we can. There's things that can be done if there's communication. But the biggest thing is drawn for our industry, obviously.
So okay, so you said draw clean or clear. What does that mean?
So, uh, so the storyboarder's responsibility is to take the script and interpret it, right? And with any good story, there's character motivations, there's intentions that are behind the writing, where a character does something because of something, right? And it's not just on a whim. It's not just because the writer says so. It's not just because the director says so. It has something to do with the story. A character opens a door to reveal something. A character picks up an object, and that object has something to do with the story, right? So, being clear is being able to tell the story and like not overcomplicate a frame with like all these lines that you can't read what's happening. Like sometimes you just need to see a hand grabbing something, or you know, being clear with the imagery and like using composition and all the techniques in film and art to help make that clear. Um,
Right.
and it could be a scratchy drawing. Like it doesn't need to be anything that's pretty. It doesn't need to be hanging in a museum. Like it can be a stick figure for all intents and purposes.
Right.
There's a lot of times with TV storyboards, and you can see it in my work on my website. There's drawings that if you stop and pause on it, you're gonna be like, "What the hell is that?" But like if you see it moving and you see it in context, it makes sense, right? So that's kind of where I'm in clear with clarity. It's being clear what the story point is and how to draw it.
Right. You also mentioned film language. What is that? That people need to know that.
Sure, film language is basically the the terms and the language that see how do I put it? Like for example, like screen direction or like composition, tone, theme, plot, like all those words that are associated with movies and TV, that's film language. And when you get into like panning, like camera moves, like panning and tilting and the 180 line and using subjectivity versus objectivity, or using juxtaposition to be able to tell a story, which is basically contrast, right?
Right.
So it's all kind of like the terms and the techniques used to help tell stories. Whether it's transitions for stuff, or if it's using a montage, or using the way you're shooting the film lenses, like all those little details that are put into making a film is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And like knowing basic stuff like screen direction, where if like you have a character that's going to the right of the screen, you want them to be coming from the other in that same direction when you see a cut, right? You don't want to have them crisscrossing for no reason. So just understanding the rules and I guess that's probably a more appropriate way of it, saying film language is like the rules of film that can and will be broken, but are guides for us to tell a clear and cohesive story.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we've covered some of the skills and knowledge you need. How about school? You have to go to school? It's a must?
No, no,
Why is
not
that?
at all.
How do you avoid school?
Um,
Is that internships? You have a friend who says, "Hey, internship here."
well, it's tough for me to say because for my knowledge from the East Coast, like I had to take the school route.
Mhm.
But like I look back on my like it's kind of hindsight is 2020, right? I look back on my career and I think whilst SVA was a great option at the time, I probably if I had known more, if I'd known some of the stuff I knew now, even about like basic stuff, I might have been able to do it a different way, like online classes or online schools and or made a presence for myself online if need be. Like that's another way you could do it. Like there's tons of people that are just doing their own shit online and YouTube, and then they get lucky with some executive that says, oh wow, look at that, or even LinkedIn, just sharing material with people and letting people see your artwork, because that ends up being an in for some people. I know DreamWorks typically they tend to favor going towards like children's book series. Like that's where Boss Baby came from. That's where How to Train Your Dragon came from. That's where almost every one of their big stories have come from children books. And they go to these book fairs all the time to look for properties that are kind of sell, right? So if a person has a children's book idea and can communicate a cool story, like that's an in sometimes. But I don't think school is the necessary needs to be the go-to. It's just an easier avenue because you have the context for networking, right?
Right.
Where like in LA here, I mean, we have CalArts, which it was started by Disney. So immediately you have your classmates, your teachers, and a whole, alumni. That's your network,
Right.
right? Where School of Visual Arts, most of those people are either teachers there or working in graphic design or working as teachers somewhere. Like there isn't like as big of a studio presence there as there is in LA.
Right.
Um, Not to say it's not non-existent. There's film being
Yeah.
made there and everything else. Like there's NYU School of Film and Video, but it's different. It's very different, especially for animation.
It's interesting, Dan. Like you were talking about earlier when you were younger, like the odds of getting into, California and animation, it just seems so far away. But today, all these different avenues, like online, man, you could create something and bam, someone catches wind. What a great time to be alive, huh?
Yeah, and I tell you, there's going to be a shift too soon. Like we're at a point in our industry, both fortunate and unfortunate, where it's going to take a big turn to, and I think maybe even towards smaller studios or more independent studios, because I think the industry in itself kind of shot itself in the foot with the streaming services
Mm,
because none of the studios are making the money they were from box office, and if they are, it's rare. And when you sell a show to like Netflix or YouTube or Apple, you don't get anything more than what you sell it for, right? So like as many times as they're going to watch my show, I'm not getting any residuals off of it
oh,
because it's not making any more money than what Netflix paid for, right? Netflix is making more money if they're getting more subscribers, but that doesn't translate to ours, right? So I think there'll be a shift, and I think that in itself will either open up more. It'll make the competition a lot harder, but it'll also open up the opportunity for more independent people to have smaller teams and have our smaller productions to make cool stories.
okay, this is good that you touched upon this in regards to the changing industry. The future, we're talking about the future of animation here. AI. Oh, like there are websites, man, you could plug in some footage and it'll spit out,
Yeah,
like short videos, potentially animated videos.
yeah.
So, in your position, are you concerned or do you see AI as more a tool for your jobs?
I mean, I think the biggest concern is just the possibilities that people are looking for out of it. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I equate it to the same as going to the digital age of it, where it's like you had paper and pencil for the longest time, and then suddenly we have Cintiqs and tablets. And I think there was a fear that like people wouldn't have jobs drawing anymore, but we're still drawing, right? So I think what's going to come down to is that AI is just going to be a tool, and it'll make a tool that it might it might seem like it's going to replace us in the beginning. Like I think people are going to try to do it, but then and they might be successful. Don't get me wrong, it's incredible. But what the problem is like the AI still can't make the idea. It can execute it and it can come up with thousands of possibilities and different directions of it, but you still need the idea. And you need someone that's going to be able to recognize if the ideas are flowing through. And you're still going to want that human aspect to it. Like, think about all of Spielberg's movies and all of John Hughes movies. Like, the reasons why they still work now is because they still connect to an audience, regardless of if we see an 8-track on screen or if we see a wagon on screen. It still connects, right? Because there's that human. It comes down to the choices the characters and the story is making on screen in terms of things that relate to us in our own life, right? We watch movies, shows like Game of Thrones, right, where you see good people making bad choices, and becoming the villains when they're not really bad people, right? And that's the human connection that I don't think AI is going to be able to do without human help. So I think I'm hoping, fingers crossed. Like I don't know the future, and I won't lie. I'm nervous and worried for the possibilities, but at the same time, like it could be really cool. Like it might make my job a little bit easier. So or
Yeah.
make it more fun.
Yeah.
Where I can think outside the box and have something spark something. And it's I think any kind of fear I have is more like just wanting to know what I can do with it.
Yes. Yes. Just embracing the possibilities as opposed to being or having this sense of scarcity. What is it going to take away? Actually,
Yeah.
what is it going to bring you? Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Sure.
agree. I agree. All right, Dan. So, this has been great. Any last bit of like advice so that viewer or listener thinking of an animation career, any last bit of motivation?
Yeah. It's funny. I just talked to a bunch of SVA students and they had a similar question. And I said, the one thing you can do is don't be an asshole. There's a lot of egos in this industry. There are a lot of, and it's funny as a former athlete, I'll say, I have, I feel I have the benefit of, you know, the artist mind and the non-artist mind, battling inside my head sometimes. And it's like super sensitive. And this is an industry where you cannot let your emotions overtake you. Like if someone says something negative about your work, or if you get a note on your work, or your work doesn't turn into the final episode because it wasn't good enough, or they had a better idea, or something changed, you can't take that shit personally because it'll eat you alive. Like at the end of the day, we're all doing a job, and that's the goal, is to make a great story. Um, but if you're too precious about yourself, or you think you're better than someone, even if you are, my fundamental rule that I always tell my kids is like, treat people how you want to be treated. And it doesn't matter what race, what religion, what size, what talent level, like that rule applies to everyone. And I think I see a lot of kids come in, a lot of young students come in with this a chip on their shoulder that they're the shit, and or they're just difficult because they're on a project they don't want to be on, and they think they're better than that. And it's like, you're not going to be on your favorite project every time, and not every project's going to be all roses and butterflies. It's hard work. It's not easy. So developing a tough skin and being professional is probably the thing I'd recommend newbies getting into quicker than not, because otherwise you'll learn the lesson hard. because no one wants to work with an a-hole, no matter how talented you are. I've seen so many people leave studios and are, jumping around because no one wants to work with them.
Wow. Dan, well said. I agree with you. Be a good person. It's not hard, guys. Be a good person. All right, Dan. Thank you so much for being on the show, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, Dan, for being on the show. The animation industry. Freaking cool, man. Well done, Dan. You've been at DreamWorks over 10 years, operating at that high of a level, at that kind of company. Well done, man. Congratulations. Tip of the cap. Thank you for showing us or just letting us know about the behind the scenes aspect of the animation industry. Totally appreciate it. All right, that's it for this episode. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. Until next time, take care and have a good one.